we feel an innate urge to defend our honor, and in most cases, this then becomes who can hurt the other more. I hear you shouting at the screen, my friends. We just need to remember that this will most likely be an irreversible decision. Once we go to that door, it will most likely close and be locked. Here are my thoughts on making the right decision when faced with this troubling scenario. Next time this happens, take a moment and tell yourself to... Welcome back to Real People, Real Talk. My name is Bobby, and if you're new here, welcome. This channel is dedicated to making life that little bit easier by talking about everyday scenarios, learning from those experiences, and becoming just a little bit better every day. In this video, I want to do a little deep dive into all things conflict. We'll touch upon holding grudges, forgiveness, and the role anger plays in how we talk and act. I'm hoping that by sharing some of this, we can learn something new and maybe implement some changes that will make it easier for us going forward. I've thought about these subject matters a lot, and I'm keen to share the things I've learned in the hope that it will maybe be useful for you too. This one here was actually a topic requested from one of my friends. He had a situation with one of his good friends where they had an argument and it ended exactly the way they both agreed it wouldn't end. Saying things they shouldn't have said. With things like this, we get to a point where we think, how many times are we going to repeat this cycle without seeing any changes? Surely, after a while, it just means that the behavior that person is displaying is just who they are. Despite the apologies thereafter where we hear the words, "it won't happen again," it does seem to be a recurring event, and unfortunately, it also seems to get worse each time. It may start off on a phone call, then maybe a one-on-one conversation, but before long, things are said in front of partners or other friends, and now it's a public issue. When it's just the two of us, we could just say, "don't talk to me like that." But if things are said in front of others, we feel an innate urge to defend our honor, and in most cases, this then becomes who can hurt the other more. This whole scenario and why we feel the need to behave that way is a separate thing to look at. But the point here is what happens next. Somebody has said or done something to us, and we now feel angry, annoyed, or offended. The way it happened was a little bit too far over the line for us, and we cannot forget it. We just can't seem to let it go. The interaction's on a loop in our minds, and every time the loop restarts, we find a new thing that we are annoyed about. Add to that the fact it was public, and we may have our partner or another friend in our ear saying something like, "that was well out of order," or "you can't let that one slide." Now we are stuck. Do we hold the grudge, or do we forgive and forget? Well, let's look at both those things for a moment. Holding a grudge is when you maintain anger, resentment, bitterness, or any other negative feeling after someone has done something to hurt you. The thing about holding a grudge for too long is that it pushes you towards reliving that moment of hurt, stoking that anger or resentment, and in some cases, can go on for a long time. It means that every time something happens with that individual, our reactions will be more and more extreme, as we compound these negative feelings that we have. Holding a grudge can be a way to protect ourselves. By staying angry at the individual who has done us wrong, we maintain a guard that ensures we don't let ourselves get into a similar scenario again. At this stage in my life, I'm personally not a fan of holding a grudge. I just don't like how I feel when I'm angry about something. Whenever I feel that heavy feeling in my chest of any sort of negativity at all I want to do is think about it, understand it better, accept whatever reality I need to accept, and then move on from it. This can be incredibly easy, like the guy having road rage for no reason. I'm not going to have to speak to him anytime soon, so I can just dismiss that, because there is no lasting impact. Or it could be incredibly hard, like an issue with a long-standing relationship or our partners. Well, here we will need to do some real work to figure it out, because the stakes are so much higher. Holding a grudge can't be good for us. In the past, I felt like me staying angry at someone would show them that what they did was really bad. But the truth is, all it did was affect my mental clarity. Depending on the level of communication, the other person might not even think they did anything that bad. So it ends up with us doing the rumination, affecting our mood and how our day goes. As humans, we are going to make mistakes. Sometimes these will be big mistakes. We're going to get angry. Whether we hold on to the anger has nothing to do with the person, who made the mistake or offended us. It comes down to how we manage and process it. This is the work we need to do in order not to feel or not to let anything fester for too long. We will need to decide whether the relationship is worth the work to change those behaviors. And if no behavioral change is observed, then we will need to decide whether or not we want to choose distance. We need to do all those things for us. Ultimately, we are the ones feeling the way we feel. Let's look at forgive and forget real quick. This is pretty self-explanatory. I guess rather than holding on to the anger, we forget what happened and forgive the wrongdoing. The truth is, holding a grudge and forgiveness aren't necessarily opposite reactions. I think that we could get angry, hold a grudge for a while, and then still forgive. These are more like stages in the process, but in order to pass through those stages, some actions will need to be taken. It will be hard to forgive if we don't understand why the person may have done or said what they did. If we don't understand, it will be hard for us to accept, and unless we accept, we will not be able to move on in whichever way we would like to move on. I'm quite certain that without this process, we will not be able to truly forgive. Let's look at some real-life examples. If someone said something hurtful to us, again, after doing so numerous times before, and the apology and the reasoning for it is exactly as it has always been, it's going to be harder and harder for us to accept. In the back of our minds, all we are really thinking is, here we go again. I should have known from last time. Unfortunately, no real forgiveness here. If somebody's late again for when we're supposed to get together after saying that it wouldn't happen again, it's going to be harder to accept. No real forgiveness here. If someone's trying to explain why they did what they did, but we don't understand it fully, meaning that we still have questions that are left unanswered, then we can't move on to the acceptance stage. No real forgiveness here. And finally, if someone does try to explain fully, but we just don't believe them because we have not seen changes despite numerous issues before, then no real forgiveness, mainly because we have no faith in the words. I hear you shouting at the screen, my friends. So how do we forgive in those instances? The only reason why we should or would consider forgiving is because it's a high-stake relationship. Wife, husband, partner, or long-term friend. If it wasn't, then at some point we probably would just choose peace for ourselves rather than trying to work with someone that doesn't really seem like they understand the impact their actions are having. Here are my thoughts on making the right decision when faced with this troubling scenario. I still firmly believe communication is key. Half of our problems are fixed when we communicate them properly to the people involved, especially as we think back at this concept of understand, accept, and move on or take action. The other party will have to go through that process too. If for any reason this does not work, then we really need to change the things that we're saying. In a high-stakes relationship, I would have to sit the person down and tell them that I hear all the things they're saying about why something has happened and the way it did. However, whenever this does happen, my bucket that is filled to the brim with love, loyalty, and care for them gets a hole in it. Me sitting down to discuss this with them is my attempt to patch up that hole so that my bucket doesn't start to leak. There is only so many holes that my bucket can take, and there is only so many patches that will keep the bucket fit for purpose. What I'm essentially saying is that my love, loyalty, and care for that person is slowly eroding due to this behavior that has been discussed multiple times. If after this very clear communication about the boundaries for the relationship, we still see no changes, then forgiveness becomes close to impossible. And here is where we need to decide about distance instead. It's so hard to find love these days, so I would heavily discourage from choosing distance over smaller issues or misalignment of preferences. But when we're talking about real pain and no light at the end of the tunnel, then hard decisions will need to be made. We just need to remember that this will most likely be an irreversible decision. Once we go through that door, it will most likely close and be locked, and therefore, we should deliberate and ensure we have exhausted all of our resources. I love the Kevin Gates quote where he says, "We reward loyalty with loyalty and disloyalty with distance." My only worry would be that we did not take enough time to understand, accept, and then take action or move on. I want to touch back on this concept of where in a heated scenario, we say and do things in anger. I've spoken about this in a number of videos before, but from what I see and hear, this is still a real problem. We talked earlier about the scenario with my friend who had an argument with one of his friends. Things got heated and they said things they shouldn't have. As this isn't the first time they have ended up here, the apologies are just not landing anymore. Then there's a scenario of when this happens in public. For some reason here, the reactions are much more extreme. The brain is incredibly quick at reacting. Any sort of insults, mentions of blame, or the pointing out of perceived negative behavior is going to send our brain into overdrive to clear our name as quickly as possible, either by passing the blame or by entering an attack mode to silence the other party. In public, we don't just have our own thoughts that are taking over. We also take the thoughts that we believe others have. We used to see this in the school playground. If somebody said something to us, we could have just decided to ignore it, but we're unable to go through with that because one of our friends just said, "Bobby, are you going to let him talk to you like that?" Or the other friend who says, "If you don't stand your ground here, everyone will think that you're weak." Now we end up in a fight or a shouting match for no reason, because we were happy to let it go in the first place. As we get older, the people around us may no longer voice those things, but we still believe they are thinking them, and so we act impulsively in our reactions. I can tell you now, no decision that I have made when I was in a rage mode has ever been a good one. I've said it before, and I will say it again. If there's any skill that we should work on, it's the skill of increasing the gap between a stimulus and a reaction. Increase the time you take to think and process between when something has gone wrong and what you're going to do about it. I'm not amazing at this yet. Only the other day I got angry about something and made a bad choice, which resulted in me having to do more work. However, being more aware has made me much better than before. Anger is a common emotion for sure. It's quick and it takes over like a raging fire that will get stoked by hundreds of external factors. The power of the pause will save you from completely burning your house down. The power of the pause is what brought you the thought of using the fire blanket to keep the problem enclosed. Have you ever noticed your breathing changes when you get really angry? We seem to breathe a lot more and a lot quicker. Our brain is essentially preparing us for fight or flight. Get as much oxygen to the muscles as quickly as possible so we can use them. We get that heavy feeling in our chest because our breathing is no longer deep or relaxed, and in some cases, it almost sounds like we aren't even breathing anymore, just huffing and puffing all over the place. Next time this happens, take a moment and tell yourself to breathe in and out properly. Take deep breaths through the nose and out the mouth, and you would have successfully changed your emotional state as you move back to more relaxed breathing, signaling that there is no threat. I mean, in an argument, unless there is a very large animal in the corner trying to eat you with its very sharp teeth, it can't be as bad as it feels, right? I hope that talking about the concepts of understand, accept, move on, and the power of the pause will be as beneficial to you as they have been for me. If you found what we talked about today useful, then please subscribe to the channel. We post every 2 weeks, and we would love to have you along for the journey. Currently, 56% of you who watch these videos are not yet subscribed. Just by clicking that little button, you would support this channel to continue bringing videos like this to the world. In the meantime, here's another video that YouTube believes you might like. Go ahead, give it a try. My name is Bobby, and this is Real People Real Talk. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.